Alright, as I just mentioned, the next thing I'm going to do is remove the upper radiator hose. So I've just got a pair of channel locks. I'm going to squeeze down the spring clamp like that, slide it back, and then I should be able to remove this radiator hose by twisting it and pulling it back. There we go. That may have a little bit of residual coolant in it. If you let it dip down low, you may get some running out. So just make sure you've still got something under there to catch your any spillage that you might have. Alright, let's see. Looks like we have 2 bolt connections for the fan shroud. One here, one here. Looks like it's a combination Phillips slash probably a metric size bolt. So I'll figure out what size that is and we'll remove those. And then I believe the fan shroud will lift out. I think there's a couple of tabs at the bottom that it like stabs into. So I think if we rock it back and up, it should remove. Let me get these removed and then we'll see what happens. Alright, I've got those 2 bolts removed. Actually, they're really like screws. They screw into the plastic receiver in the top of the radiator. They look like that. Like I said, it's a combination Phillips or 10mm. So I've got those removed. As I suspected, the radiator fan shroud will pull away, and then you can see mine's been broken and repaired by somebody in the past, not me. We should be able to pull this up. There we go. Out of the way. If you notice at the bottom, there's a like a tab here and a tab here that slide into these receivers on the bottom of the radiator. So now the shroud's out of the way. I guess the next thing we need to do is figure out how to remove the radiator itself. So let me do a little bit of investigating and I will be right back. Alright, so I think the next step here is going to be removing the rest of the hose connections to the radiator. So I'm going to start with this one up top that goes over to the coolant reservoir. So it's just got a couple of clips here that will pop out easily. It should be able to twist this and loosen that. Now we can just set that off to the side, kind of tuck it somewhere. Now we need to get down under the vehicle, and we've got 3 connections down here. You've got the lower radiator hose, and you've got 2 smaller coolant lines here, all of which are held on with spring clamps. So I'm going to need my channel locks, and I'm going to need to lay down under the vehicle again and remove those. Now they're almost certainly going to dump fluid when we pull them off, so I'm going to slide my catch basin over underneath this part here and try to position myself so I can get those spring clamps off. So let me get in position and we will work on that next. Alright, now I'm laying under the vehicle, more towards the passenger side, and you can see the radiator hoses that we just looked at from above. Here's the lower radiator hose and then those 2 smaller lines here and here. Now, as you can see, there's a wiring harness passing in front and it's connected to this bracket here. I think I'm going to remove this. I've already started to loosen this, and that is a 10mm bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this bolt, see if I can swing this bracket down and out of the way, and that should give us the working clearance we need to get to those hoses. So let me remove the bracket and then we'll take a look. Okay, you can see that I've removed that bolt and I just put it back in the hole so I didn't lose it, which allowed us to swing this bracket down, kind of gently move this harness out of the way, and now we can get access to the spring clamps. This one looks like a pair of channel locks will work fine. These, you kind of need a wider set of pliers, so I'll probably use like a set of electrician's Klein pliers or something like that to get those off. So I'm going to go ahead and slide those clamps back, and then we'll work on removing the hoses. Alright, so you can see that I've got the spring clamps pulled away from the nipples on the bottom of the radiator. So I think I'm going to work on removing them from above. But I would definitely recommend removing this bracket out of your way. Just made it a lot easier. And Of course, I use the channel locks, as I said, for the larger spring clamp on the lower radiator hose. That's the larger hose. And then this is what I use to remove the spring clamps on the two smaller hoses. Alright, so let me get back up top and we'll try to remove those from the top side. Alright, so I was about to remove the two smaller lines. I got the lower radiator hose removed. And I was about to remove these when it dawned on me that these are actually the supply and return lines from the transmission to the transmission cooler. Which is part of the radiator. So you don't want to just yank these off. What I'm hoping I can do is pull them off and plug them temporarily with a couple of bolts. I've got a couple of bolts like this that I'm hoping I can put in a line and maybe put the spring clamp back over the end to keep the transmission fluid from leaking out, so we don't dump a bunch of fluid, because adding transmission fluid to this transmission is a pain in the neck. You actually have to do it from under the vehicle. There is no dipstick. So anyway, that's my plan. We'll see how this goes. I will see if I can get those removed and put the bolts in them. And then we should have the radiator free of any connections, and then we just need to move on to removing some retaining brackets on the top. So I'm going to plug those lines, hopefully, and move on to getting the radiator out of the vehicle. Alright, so I got the transmission cooler lines removed. I really didn't lose a whole lot of fluid when I disconnected them. Most of it actually came out of the cooler itself, which is inevitable, and you know, that's not a big deal, because we're removing the cooler as part of the radiator. And my trick with the bolts didn't work great because the bolts were too small. The diameter was too small, so I just kind of tied the lines up and out of the way so they wouldn't be dripping fluid. And as you can see, there's just a little tiny bit in my pan down there. Like I said, that mostly came out of the cooler itself, so I didn't lose a whole lot of fluid. Hopefully I won't need to add any once we're done with this. But so really now the radiator is no longer connected to anything other than to the frame of the car, and it's held on by these retainer clips up top that have I think this is a 12mm bolt. I've loosened those enough to the point where I can actually just pull those up, slide them out of the way, and now our radiator should be free. And we can pull it straight up and out of the vehicle. And you can see mine's in pretty rough shape. It's been leaking for a while, obviously, because there's a fair amount of coolant down at the bottom. So anyway, we've got it out of the vehicle now. I need to unbox my new one, and we will get on with putting it in the vehicle. Be right back. Alright, so here's my new radiator. I've got it unpackaged. I purchased a Denso unit. I believe that's the OEM manufacturer, and I ordered this from rockauto.com. I want to say it cost about $90 to $100. So not too bad. It's a pretty good deal. Now I just noticed something. I do need to transfer these rubber like vibration isolation grommets from the old radiator to the new one, because the mounting hole in the front of the vehicle for the lower part of the radiator is the same diameter as that grommet. I'll show you that in a second, but we need to take these and put them on these studs on the bottom of the new radiator. So I'll do that now. And now we are ready to carefully and gently take the new radiator and drop it into place in the vehicle. Just be very careful not to damage any of the fins. You want to keep them nice and straight so you get maximum airflow through there. And you also want to have clean hands. You don't want to get oil or anything like that all over the fins. So let me get this into place and we will work on reconnecting it. Alright, so we're looking back down into the engine bay, and you can see on the left and on the right the two mounting clips that I referred to. Those holes in the center are what those round rubber grommets needed to drop down into and sit in. So we just need to carefully lower the radiator down into place. Obviously the hose connections need to face backwards, and you just want to make sure that the grommets are seated in both of those holes. So let me get it in place and then we'll work on reconnecting these clips at the top. Alright, so the radiator is lowered into place, but I just realized I failed to recognize that I also need to transfer the rubber grommets for the top of the radiator off of the old one. So this one and this one need to be installed up top here. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. Really do need to get a tripod or some sort of mounting device for my camera, but we need to do that. So I'm going to do that with this one as well, and then we will retighten these bolts, which again I believe were 12mm. Then we can work on reconnecting all our lines. So moving on.